does not cause abuse. And yet so many people seem to think that it does. And so what I want to talk about today is the systemic reasons, the belief system, the worldview of the abusive man and what really drives this. And I am beyond excited to have Lisa Carr here talking to us on Narcissism Unmasked. It is so incredible. I watch her content all the time under YV Edit on TikTok, and it's just profound to hear your take on where this all comes from. So can you just introduce yourself first and let's start there?
Thank you so much. Yeah. Hi, I'm Lisa. I go by YV Edit on TikTok, on YouTube. I host a podcast called The Audacity. I'm sure we'll have a link to it in the description with my two amazing co-hosts, The Sovereign Woman and Gwen Beer. We're so excited. We just dropped our first 3 episodes. So if you're in for a binge, go for it. I also want to plug femfreeze.org, an organization started by Shar Henley and a bunch of us women in the creator space. Everyone who's contributed to it so far is basically a part of the organization. So if you feel inclined, please go sign up. We have a mailing list. We have a donations link. If you are able to, just please support us. And we can't wait to share more about what we're doing.
Yeah, I remember your first video on that topic, and it's such a great platform. And we're going to get more into that. And I can't wait because I love that movement. So let's kind of talk about this belief, right? That narcissism causes abuse, or that even that narcissism is caused by childhood trauma. I know what we now know about narcissism is that it's biosocial. There's really no one definitive answer. Could be trauma, could be overindulgence, genetics, a combination of. So it's less ideal to focus on where narcissism comes from. And we always spend so much time as women, like, why does he do what he's doing? And how can I get him to change? And I always say to my clients, like, how do you switch that into focus on you? What's the impact of this abusiveness on you? And why do you tolerate it? From a place of curiosity, not shame, not judging yourself, but just asking yourself. And I know social conditioning is hugely part of it for men and for women in our behaviors. But let's talk about the societal belief systems that exist around abusiveness and men's entitlement that actually leads them or causes them to be abusive. What have you seen?
I'm so glad that we're talking about this because honestly, as somebody who had to learn about narcissism for a different reason that didn't have to do with men, it's just been fascinating that as I started making content about men for women, I found so many of the same exact parallels. And I was like, what my brain immediately goes to, like, what is the cause? What's the pattern here? What are we looking at? And I love that you're thinking about it too. And so my thought contribution to this, I think that it's caused by a lack, it's like this insecurity. I think it has to do first and foremost, like the one thing about a narcissist is that they're never going to be secure. That's the problem. That's why nothing that you ever do is like good enough. And everything that they try to do is to make you insecure as well. And so to me, it comes from this concept of like, there's not enough out there. It's a competition. It's a dog eat dog kind of world. I'm insecure. I'm not good enough. You're not good enough. And that makes me feel better for a second if I can convince you and get you to believe that. And I think that the reason it's so common in men is because the patriarchy, that's exactly how it hurts men. When we talk about the patriarchy hurts men too, this is what I mean, is it makes them ultimately extremely insecure. And beyond that, makes them unable to attach themselves to things that will make them feel secure, like their femininity, like deep friendships, like a good self-esteem. But instead, they're forced by society to attach themselves and their worth to like external factors, like their body, their muscles, cars, women. All of these things are just external factors to them that they think it's going to guarantee them approval or acceptance, but it just causes more and more insecurity. You know what I mean?
It's such a cycle for them. I know the more they take from you, the more they want, and it never fills, never what they're actually seeking.
Makes you a black hole. Yeah.
It is. Oh, it is such a black hole. And I think that's a huge misconception, right? That abusive men can't control themselves or that they can't help it.
Oh, yeah.
Or that it's in their nature. And it's actually not. It's learned. So much of it is connected to the patriarchy. But how do men react to the patriarchy when you talk about how it harms them too? What do you find men's reaction to that is?
Honestly, I don't have a whole lot of men in my comments. I'm really good at I know, for some reason, like my content, I'm just a yapper and they're just allergic to my content. But what I will say, I think a lot of men's like common reaction is they just get defensive and it just sort of reinforces the fact that they're narcissistically oriented. You know what I mean? Like a narcissist will never admit fault. Like the reaction I typically get is that they'll go out of their way to be like, but what about women? Or like, what about this? You know, it's exactly how you would expect a narcissist to react. And the good men will be like, yes, this is a problem. And I wish other men didn't do this, you know? And I see it in myself where I do it and it makes me feel gross and I want to stop. And it's like, as somebody that's grown up seeing narcissism, that was like my reaction to when I started repeating, you know, how like when you're sort of raised in a narcissistic environment, you start repeating those cycles without knowing it oftentimes. And before you're aware of it in yourself, it's like the narcissistic fleas or whatever. And when I started like seeing that behavior, sort of like looking at myself doing that behavior, I was like, oh, that's not who I want to be. I want to stop. Like, I got to figure out what this is so I can like root it out. And I think that's how good men feel about what they've been like taught by the patriarchy and that insecurity they've been given. They're like, what do I do to sort of break out of this? I don't want to be here. This feels like I'm stuck. This feels like I'm insecure and I want to feel secure. I want to do something. I want to invest in something. I want to help something grow. And then the narcissistic men, the men that have fallen victim to the conditioning, they'll be like, oh, but what about this? And like, well, men built the world, and like they'll deflect and, you know, the gambit, the whole thing.
Yeah. I find that now that I know what narcissism is, what a belief system looks like, this belief system of the abusive man, and it's outlined really well, even in Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. He really
I love that
the
book.
mindset.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I love that one.
Yes.
Another great one too is Sandra L. Brown, How to Spot a Dangerous Man. She goes through these 8 different archetypes. There can be overlap. Lundy Bancroft has 14 archetypes, but you'll see the abusive man in your life in these stories and in these archetypes. It's so interesting. But what I see is a lack of willingness to change, to face it. And what you are talking about, this deflection, it's so obvious once you see it, if you're not actively stuck in a trauma bond. When you're in it, I always feel like you see it and you don't see it.
Yeah.
But once you see it, it's crystal clear in front of you that an abusive man has this mindset that he's entitled to treat you this way, that, you know, you're just a woman. You often see traditional gender roles, harmful ones. You know, fundamentally, it's nice. Embrace your femininity. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
But to the point of like, be barefoot in the kitchen, you've gone too far. You've gone too far. How is it? Even though I cook, you know, I'm called an angry, bitter, cat-loving misandrous once a day. And I don't even like cats.
It's not funny.
I don't hate men. I don't like abusive men. And that seems to trigger a lot of men. But I think those are the men that you're like, okay, you're the one I don't care about.
Exactly. The men that try to villainize you, they're just acting narcissistically. Like, it's almost like this concept of women sets men off to the point where they can't do anything. They can't take anything seriously that's associated with us. And so then they end up not embracing their femininity. I mean, I feel like that's way more important. I think a lot of men are drawn to feminine women because they want to embrace their own femininity so bad. And I'm like, women embrace their masculinity every day. Every single day we're out here doing, you know, we're on schedule, we're working, we're rigid in our routines, we know what we're doing. All these things that people associate with men and masculinity, women are expected to do that every single day, more than men. Imagine how much more a mother has to be in her masculinity. People think of mothers as feminine. It's like, no, like from having been a teacher of young kids, I can tell you, you got to be in your masculine to deal with kids because they don't respond well to unstructured, you know, creative, as much as you would think they would. But no, they don't. They need structure and they need very hard expectations and they need someone to be very consistent. So in a way, it's like men ignore the fact that women have been embracing their masculinity for as long as we've existed. This is why women are often considered like magical, or men will be like, wow, how do women do it? You just embrace both sides of it. You're like both flexible, soft, feminine, friendly, nice, understanding, empathetic, and I'm also protective. I'm also strong. I'm also regimented. I'm also disciplined. I'm both of those things. And this is why women, it's like, you can't beat a woman down hard enough. Like, we will survive. Like women, especially like anyone that's made it out of a narcissistic abuse relationship, like you are some of the strongest people, because these are the people that will try to break you down into nothing. And women will still rise up and be like, well, I had to go to a shelter. I had to, save up every penny. I had to stop buying anything. I had to squirrel things away, but I made it out. I crawled out on my hands and knees, and I've never gone back. And it's like, that is amazing. That's amazing.
Resilience,
Exactly.
courage.
And we
Yeah.
associate all of that with masculinity. And it's like, show me a man who is not like living in a roach infested apartment after his divorce, has no furniture, has no food in the fridge, has been eating Taco Bell, hasn't picked up his kid. Like, that's how men get when they're in a tough situation. And we call them masculine. It's crazy. It's like they're neither.
Even if that's true, it's his ex-wife's fault. She took him for
Absolutely.
everything.
Oh, absolutely.
She's withholding the kids. She's why he has no money. And it's like, that statistically speaking, that's not true. Studies
First
prove
of
that.
all.
Oh, where's your study
of all.
from? Like the deflection, the discrediting, the minimizing, it's all just a tool for them to ignore reality. I think that a lot of these abusive men are actually honestly experiencing cognitive dissonance. Like they've been taught this thing. And then when you face them with facts and statistics, they're like, yeah, well, what?
Exactly. And from arguing with the narcissist that you're not going to give them enough facts. You're not going to give them enough proof. Some people are just going to be stuck in that mindset. And I think there is an overlap of like real narcissists and just male behavior. And I think it's also telling that that's who succeeds in our current structures. Like, CEOs have the highest rates of like dark triad characteristics. And it's like, that's who men admire, right? Like, people often say you can't satirize masculinity because men will just take it for real. Like, they'll be like, no, Tyler Durden. Like, they'll be like, no, like that guy from The Boys on Amazon, that like literally evil dictator. They're like, yeah, no, that guy's cool. Like, it's like, you can't actually make a man villainous, Walter White from Breaking Bad. Like, people were rooting for that man until the end. And women hated him from episode 1, right? Like, women were like, oh, I'm on his wife's side every time. Because at this point, brother, you have the walls of the house lined with money and you're still trying to cook meth. Like, no, that's crazy. You should stop. And men were like, yeah, Skylar White is the most hated female character in television history because she dared to. Can you believe that?
Oh my God. Because I was on her side the whole time. Like he sought after power at the expense of his life, his family, his health, everything. But it seems like he did it from this amazing place, right? He was going to die of cancer and he just wanted to leave his family with something. And maybe that's how it started. I think arguably he became so addicted to the power of it all that he was willing to burn his own life to the ground.
Exactly. And my point is, I know it sounds like I got sidetracked, but my point is that men are allowed to look at that and glorify that, right? And it's like his entitlement to power is what other men want to feel like. You know what I mean? It's like we project, as a society, we project onto, the media, right? Media is one thing. The writers of Breaking Bad were trying to tell a story, and that story is a story of power. The story of Ozymandias or whatever, like that's, the second to last episode was called that. And it's like this display of his power right before it crumbles and just where he's ended up. And he's like, say my name and all this stuff. And it's like they were trying to tell that story of, look at this man, look what he's become. But men's response to that was, cool. Yeah, that I would do that too. And it's like, see, there you go. There you have it. They're like, Skylar was like, she was holding him back from his true power. It was time. Yeah.
Right. It's all how you can scapegoat a woman who didn't sign up for any of this and was dragged through it and could have faced criminal charges and all, like, it's wild. But again, it's the entitlement to, like, he's the leader of the household and he got to make these decisions, and what's wrong with wanting power? You are so right that that's glorified. Something really interesting about the overlap of masculinity and narcissism. Just want people to know that doesn't mean that all men are narcissists or that women cannot be narcissistic. It's just not the topic right now.
Oh, for sure.
But there is such an overlap in that. I think the reason why more men are diagnosed with it and even more men are called out for it is because the behavior is so prevalent in men because it's expected. A lot of it's almost even maybe fostered or it's rewarded. Narcissistic behavior from men is rewarded. And I think that may even sort of force female narcissists into a more of a covert role.
I think about this a lot, the fact that like toxic masculinity is basically just, it's too much masculinity. It's masculinity by itself. It's like a snake, again, it's like a snake eating its own tail. And like, when you think about the fact that men, if you think of masculinity and femininity as a spectrum, right? And you say, this is the most masculine you can be, and this is the most feminine you can be. Ideally, you should want to be in the middle, or you should want to, it should be more of a circle or something, not a spectrum, because then men who say that they want to be masculine, if they want to be the most masculine, they have to also be the most like toxic. Do you know what I mean? And going along with what you said about female narcissism, I don't know if you ever saw that documentary about the woman that people thought was God and like she had like a cult and everything. Anyways, she was very, very hyper feminine. She was kind of like, she had all these like men around her. She had a very chaotic lifestyle. She was always like in her creative, like she drank a lot. And yeah, she was an absolute narcissist, but she was like that toxic feminine. And it was very covert because she would gather men around her and they would do her bidding for her. And it's like, yeah. And I made like a funny video about that. And I was like, yeah, when men say they want truly just a feminine woman, I hope they know this is what they're asking for. Like a woman who's only ever and only in her feminine, she's going to be getting other people to do things for her. She's going to be juggling men. Like she was never single at any point. At some points, she had multiple partners. At some point, they were like carrying her around literally from place to place. And they were just enabling her behavior, and she was very covert about it. It's just interesting. It's like, I feel like narcissism is a lot of times just too much of one thing too. Like,
yeah, I hear you. What do you think you see in like covert narcissists that are men? What are some of the tactics that you see, especially now, sort of like male behavior, bad male behavior? What do you see that you're like, oh, I wish more women saw what that is earlier on?
You said covert. I think a lot of it is that almost hyper feminine behavior. It'll be a man who pretends to be like a girl's girl. They'll be like the kind that are very
male feminists.
Yes, openly male feminists. They paint their nails. They're like, oh, I like worship you or whatever. Like they'll kind of love bomb you too much too soon. They'll be like, oh, I'm helpless. Like I'm depressed. They're just very much in that like, help me, like I'm nothing. And then every once in a while, they'll have that rage outburst or like they'll get kind of scary. And it's scary, especially with men, because they'll play covert, they'll play, kind of belly up and like I'm helpless and like I just need kind of a mommy or whatever. But they do have that rage. They do have sometimes that strength, advantage over you, and they still can employ that. And so it becomes this kind of scary, like they'll go from being helpless and being like, oh, I'm gonna, hurt myself or something if you leave, or worse, to like push you up against a wall and then be like, I don't know why I did that. Like, I was just scared. I was just,
Yeah, I just couldn't help myself. I couldn't control myself. I was just so angry. You made me do that.
Yeah,
or
you made me do that. Yeah.
It'll be your fault. That blame shifting, but it's so subtle, the grooming in an abusive relationship. Everybody seems to think that he sits you down on the first date and calls you the B-word.
Oh yeah. No,
table.
Seriously. Yeah.
He's the nicest guy you'll ever meet until he's not. It's going to change over the course of the relationship. There'll be months, at least months, where he's pretty great, pretty consistently great. And then it sort of switches, but not just a light switch goes off. It's the introduction of abuse, but still mixed with kindness. That's why it's so hard to see, because it's always like, what if it was abuse? He yelled, but was it because he had a bad day? Or, he said I triggered him. Maybe that's when we start to buy into that, but it's because we built trust and dependency. I often think that women are not afraid enough of men. I actually find it baffling when women are like, I'm not afraid of men. I don't understand it. That seems like,
no, you should
I'm not saying we shouldn't walk around in fear, like terrified constantly, but a healthy amount of fear, I think, is such an appropriate response to the way that the world is right now. What's your take on women being afraid of men? Choosing the bear.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like it's so much responsible for how much crap I've avoided in my life, to be honest. From the time I was very young, I didn't have like a man around. And my mom never really brought me around men. She was a single mom and she never really brought me around men. And then she just so happened to marry just the best, kindest, most amazing man in the world, my dad. And I'm just so thankful, but she always had instilled in me a very healthy fear of men and just being like, nope, he's not a nice man. Do not spend time around, like she just would always watch out for like grown men that would always try to get too friendly with me as a little girl. Like she always was like, no, you did not need to go over there. You did not need to sit on his lap or whatever he's asking. Like, and you know what, even like in high school and through the party days that a lot of people have as a teenager, I always had this very healthy fear of like, be really wary of whenever you're alone with a man. And I'll tell you something else. One of the first parties I went to that I was really not being careful at, that really instilled this fear in me because I got way too drunk, way too fast. And we were at this like grown man's house that was letting teenagers party there. I'm going to let you guess why. And I just happened to have my best friend, shout out to Teddy. If you ever listen to this, I'll have to send it to you. But my very best friend, she came with me to that party. And when I went up to that man's room where he guided me to pass out there, she went up there with me and she stayed there with me and she laid in his bed with me and he tried to come in several times to like check on me, whatever. And she sent him away every time. She's like, yep, she's fine. She's good. I'm right here. And I remember feeling in that moment like, oh my God, I would have been in real trouble if she wasn't here. And it's just moments like that punctuated throughout my life where I was like, oh, I'm not going to let this happen again. I'm not going to be left alone. It's just those things. I just can't caution young girls enough to just, if you ever even have like a little funny feeling, or even if you don't, just to be safe. If you're like, this is too soon to be alone with him. This is too soon to go up to his place, or it's too soon to drink around him on a date, or whatever you need to do to feel ultimately safe and in control of yourself. Share your location with your friends, like all this stuff, because I promise you, every woman that's ever been assaulted or, whatever, you're going to wish you had that moment back. Like you're going to wish you could rewind back time and just be safe again and just have that ability to feel safe and unviolated in your body again, because you really can't be safe enough. And the fact that I was so safe and so careful, and still, there are so many moments in my life where I have been, assaulted, where I have been, followed and yelled at and called names and catcalled. And, I've had stalkers. Like, it's insane. And the fact is that I have been safe. I didn't just show up anywhere. I really cannot champion it enough. It's always the bear. It's always the other option. Never be alone. Never go anywhere alone. Like, be where people can hear you scream, all that.
I remember being raised with a very conflicting viewpoint. Men are predatory, though that wasn't the language. Fundamentally, I understood, right? Like, I remember being 11 or 12, my mom would say, boys will say anything to get what they want from you. They'll tell you that it's going to fall off, that they're going to turn blue, just put it in for a minute. They're going to tell you all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But she also said to give people the benefit of the doubt, and would sort of reinforce this belief of like, well, maybe he didn't mean it that way. And maybe, so I'm being told that they're predatory, and I'm also being told to give them the benefit of the doubt. But as an adult now, I realize something so interesting, that if I really think about where I learned that it's all men, I learned that from men. men constantly, to this day, to this minute, as of this morning, constantly telling me that it's all men. When they say things like, well, you were drunk at that party, so, if it happened to you, whose fault was it? Why? Are you saying that if I'm drunk, that all men cannot control themselves and they have this biological need to R-word people? Like,
Spot
just
on. Yeah.
clarify what you were saying to me. Brings up the most sarcastic parts of me because their case for this is so weak. It's so pathetically weak. It's so transparent that the system is designed for it to be the woman's fault, no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the most wild narrative in my side of TikTok, feminism side, narcissism side, is that women never take accountability. And I'm like, we literally are accountable for things that happen to us, and the perpetrators are not held accountable. It is the most wild statement, the most contradictory, insane statement I've ever heard, that women don't take accountability.
One of the things that radicalized me the most was hearing Brock Turner's dad say that he's a good kid. It was just 15 minutes of fun. Are you really going to ruin his life over that? And just thinking about that in my mind, the fact that it was an unconscious young woman behind a dumpster and his dad called that 15 minutes of fun. Like, how sick in the head are you at that point to not be horrified, let alone, at what your child did, but to be like, that was fun for him. And yeah, he was just having a bit of fun. Like,
what about that is fun? The fact that that's fun. Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right? Like, frame that. Yeah.
Let's just take a moment there and realize that we're R-wording someone who's unconscious behind a dumpster is fun. And we wouldn't want to ruin his life. Never mind the fact that her life is ruined. So women are accountable, far too accountable. I think we need to take a lot less accountability. And I know men will drop off and lose their minds because those are the ones that are telling you, they're screaming out loud how unimportant they are because they're giving you this horrendous message. But I do want to say that so many men will kind of self-identify as abusers. Obviously, they don't say I'm an abuser. They say the complete opposite, but with their actions, they are telling you that they're abusive and women are not listening. So how do we keep ourselves safe? Look at all the things that we have to do. How do you keep yourselves safe from getting into a relationship with an abusive man?
It's a good one. I would say one of the biggest things I've learned is I do tend to repel narcissists. I've noticed, like, just over my adulthood, and especially ever since I realized I've had one in my life all along. It's been really interesting to see how whenever I do meet them in real life, they don't like me. They don't really stick to me. And I realize it's because I kind of naturally gray rock. And I'm sure the people on your channel know very well what that is, but it's basically where you act kind of unimpressed, kind of just keep to yourself, kind of give just 1-2 word answers. Even when people are telling you these like grandiose stories or, sort of expressing this like unusually high interest in you, you don't really automatically bond to it. You don't overreact to it. You basically just take everything with a grain of salt. Everything that people say, you just sort of like, oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I have a friend who does that, or, I've heard about that before. Like, and you can be polite. You can be like, oh, so, tell me more. But just things where you're not just fawning at, when somebody is displaying like grandiose behavior around you. I know that as a society, we're sort of trained to respond well to that, which is crazy because I also come from a culture where you don't do that, where we know very well, like the Slavic culture, we have all sorts of sayings for somebody's trying to bamboozle you. And I feel like in America, it's kind of like mixed with capitalism and like show culture, like showbiz culture. People are very prone to falling for these grandiose narcissists. It's like, oh, that's just a good leader. I mean, they voted for Trump, for God's sakes. Like, it's a country that's very easily conned by narcissistic people. So it's one of those things where I think you have to get really good at gray rocking and just naturally being in your own, I guess, like taking up space with your own presence rather than sort of glomming onto the presence of others, just not being like super easily impressed, not being very easily like, I don't know. I feel like narcissists also often want to do things really fast and just putting kind of like distance in between you and that person, like right away being like, they'll usually be like, oh, there's this party tomorrow night, or like, let's go to dinner, or like, they'll want to stay up late or something like that. And just putting like like, don't do that. Like, be like, do I want to do that? Or, am I just feeling like this peer pressure and this person's really excited? That's them testing your boundaries. That's them testing your compliance, right? They're like, oh, are they going to do something that they clearly don't want to do or that they're clearly not into? They always want to test you before they really dive into the abuse. And so I feel like I never really give people the chance. If I meet somebody and they're like, oh, the next, tomorrow, like with this and this, I'm like, oh, I'm actually busy tomorrow. Even if I'm not, I'll just be like, unless it's
something that you trust already. And I mean, I realize you're married, so you're not in the dating world, but for the people that are out in the dating world, working on people-pleasing tendencies and boundaries. I feel like boundaries is like this big word of like, you need boundaries, but like you need boundaries. Seriously, for real, you need boundaries. I never even thought about the concept of boundaries. I knew what they were, but I just never thought like, well, what are my boundaries? I would have told you they were things that I was accepting in my own abusive relationship. How does that make sense, right? But what you described early on, the way that you get sort of, I mean, really it's coerced, right? Into letting go of your boundaries. And I canceled plans to go on a first date.
Yeah.
And he knew that I was canceling plans. He pressured me to cancel them. And I was so flattered. Don't be flattered at that stuff. Recognize it, slow it down, really consider how you feel. We need to be able to trust our own instincts, but society really pushes back at that, right? We're not supposed to trust our own.
Oh my God.
Don't want to be
especially for women. If you want to find love, every single rom-com is like that, right? Uptight woman meets fun and competent, like goofy guy, and they go on a whirlwind romance and she cancels all her plans and she uproots her whole life. And then somehow they live happily ever after, but that's not how it goes in real life. Your romance should not be this whirlwind, like you're canceling your plans, you're staying up all night talking on the phone. Like I often tell people, like, that is not what happened when me and my husband met. Like that was one of his biggest, greenest flags. The fact that he was like, okay, I'm going to bed now. Good night. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Like I'll check in with you tomorrow. Or like just having like consistent communication that wasn't like all the time, every single day, go on the date with me, quit your job and travel the world with me. Like just nothing crazy like that. Nothing crazy like that. I know a lot of people are talking about the trophy wife case right now. And it's like, that's why you should never marry somebody within a week of meeting them. That is never a person who wants your best interests at heart. That is never
why
that
the
person.
Speed, my rhetorical question is, ask yourself, why does this necessitate such speed? Oh, I just love you. So then love me while we date. Why do we have to be in love and live together and have children too quickly? And
so true.
I've had clients that are like, so we've been together for a year. Our daughter is 2 months old. And I'm like, that math feels quick. And I get it. It was an unplanned pregnancy, but he said he would give you the sun, moon, and stars and take care of. And now you are fighting in custody for $26 in child support. It's wild. So I think not people pleasing, having good boundaries, educating yourself on the abuse tactics, and decentering. I have never loved anything more than this movement. When I hear women talk about decentering men, and I know we're like the angry cat ladies, right? And
it doesn't matter.
Both in committed relationships. Call me what you want. I don't need a relationship to mean anything, right? I would rather be alone than be abused. But
absolutely.
The movement of decentering men that women are having, it just means that the man isn't the center. I mean, you are a happily married woman who decenters men. So it's like, that doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. It makes
decenter any man that doesn't bring value to my life. Absolutely. They're kicking and screaming because a narcissist can't stand to not be the center of attention.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
It really shows you, again, that type
comes
of man.
Full circle.
Like, you're going to die alone, Lisa. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
But why do they care so much? We know the answer because that's their biggest fear that they are projecting onto us. But in this movement of decentering men, tell me more about this website that you were mentioning at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So Operation Fem Freeze, this was started by Shar Henley in the wake of the US election. And basically, there was this immediate stomach drop on November 6th or whenever we woke up and basically the election had been called. There was this massive drop in every woman's stomach, body, whatever. there was this gap of like, what do? We somehow were not prepared. And Shar just comes out the gates swinging. We had no idea. We have this group chat where we have our American women creator group chat where we support each other and talk about the things that are happening in our godforsaken country and how we're going to help women deal with that. And Shar just came out with this 24 hours later. I mean, literally, it's like election day, results day. Next day, we have Operation Fem Freeze. We have femfreeze.org. We have a 5-step plan of how we're going to boycott, how we're going to decenter men in the wake of this election. Because, and I don't want to leave white women out of this, but what happened in this election was a lot of men showed their whole ass. You know, they showed how they feel about women, about women's rights. And it's even more so the men that didn't show up, you know, because I feel like they showed out for Joe Biden. The 2 times that Trump has won was against a woman. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, we're on our own. We're on our own out here. And there's even other women that voted against women's rights. And so we're basically trying to decenter the patriarchy, capitalism, this conservative like idea that women are just commodities, women are just bodies, women are just there for men's pleasure, and we're removing ourselves. And so basically the 5 steps, we are getting off the dating apps completely, because women are used as bait on there. They're used as fodder. Even if your profile's inactive, they'll still show it to men just to keep the men on the app, because men need women. Okay. So the ladies are off the dating apps. We're not going to any bars, nightclubs. This is all for the month of December. This is a December long boycott, protest, and we can keep it going. But it's just basically something to kick off the movement and get people to the website, get people signed up. There will be a lot more to come. But for the month of December, we're not going to bars and nightclubs. We're off the dating apps. We are curbing holiday spending, because women tend to be the ones that spend the most around the holidays. And there's so many reasons not to do that. One of which just being overconsumption, and we don't want to contribute to that. You know, the economy, we don't want to be supporting the economy in a country that doesn't care for women. If we are going to support any businesses, they're going to be Black or brown or immigrant owned businesses, so that we are speaking with our money, so that we are putting our money where our mouth is, and we're not spending corporations that help to get Donald Trump elected and women's rights get taken away. Also, men don't really shop for their family. Like, women are the thing that makes holiday magic happen. So we're just withdrawing our presence from all of these places where we're basically used as bait or a commodity. We're also not engaging with the trolls, as we mentioned in the beginning. We were talking about this, I think, off the recording, but yeah, we're not engaging with any male-centered content online. Like, we're not stitching Andrew Tate takes or, you know, male troll things that they're saying. We're not talking about that stuff. We're not responding to trolls in the comments, even though it's like easy, even though it can be fun or funny. Their biggest fear is just us not paying attention to them. So once again, we're removing ourselves. And then we're also removing ourselves from making too little. So this is the time to ask for a raise before the tariffs hit. This is the time to start charging more for your services. This is the time to not be accepting jobs that are paying you like joke money, and just say no and see if they don't raise the price, you know, at least try, because I know it's like, it's a hustle out here, but it's also, women really do need to push back a little bit at how entitled people, especially men, are to our presence. And that's basically the essence of the movement. Femfreeze.org, FEMMEFREEZE.org. Please go visit and at least get on the mailing list so that you get updates. And please try to do the 5 steps if you're living in the US, because it would be amazing to just make a dent with our money, you know, get off the dating apps, leave men just high and dry, because that's what they've done to us.
Yep. I always say a narcissist's biggest fear is to be insignificant. And
Exactly.
on all men. But a lot of men have that too. And that's why they're so loud in the comment sections. And they're like, you're going to try alone. Your biggest fear, you're just putting it on me. You know, alone sounds great. We're not alone. We're with our friends. We're with our cats. We're with our dogs. We're good. We have our family.
Yeah. And so many people feel entitled to women's attention that it's kind of a relief a lot of times to be alone. Like, even when we just go out in public, it's like, oh my God, like people will talk to you. People will assume you're just down to chat. People will assume, like, I live in like this kind of rich part of town. And like, I've had so many old men with their wives in tow be like, compliment me on my appearance. Just leave us alone. Actually, that would be fucking great. If none of y'all just ever talk to me again, I'd be so happy.
They think you don't want that because, again, they think they know better. They think they know what women
It's
want.
because they want that. Yeah. It's a projection too. It's like they wish somebody would just pay attention to them. They wish somebody would just tell them that they're significant in any way.
But they're not, and they hate it.
Yeah.
But honestly, the reasons why men can be so abusive, society enables it, promotes it to the highest office in the land, right? So a huge problem, but being aware of it and just doing what we can do to keep ourselves safe is so important. So it was amazing having this conversation with you and just,
thank you so much for having me.
Please follow Lisa on her socials. They'll all be linked in the caption. So please check her out and check out femfreeze.org as well. And, it's been so amazing having you. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all.
Healing from abuse and unpacking why you're a people pleaser, codependency issues, and what has led you into toxic and abusive relationships can be so challenging. I work with clients one-on-one in my Rebuilding After Trauma Bonds, Rebuilding After Abuse focused sessions. I also have an amazing group coaching program that I host with Dr. Carrie McAvoy called Healing Strong. And this is for people who have already exited an abusive relationship and are struggling just to get closure and really come to terms with who they are and how they got here and really how to move your life forward. So I strongly encourage you to check out Healing Strong or my one-on-one private coaching sessions. Healing from abuse